Hi everybody, welcome back. Recently I talked about what it was like to get a job as a police officer. I've had a lot of questions from that video, and some of which were relating to once you got the job, what was it like on a daily basis to be a police officer or a cop. When I got hired, the department that I worked for had rotating shifts. You started your shift at the time it was 8 to 4, 4 to midnight, midnight to 8. That got changed around a little bit, and now that since I've retired, they've gone to 12-hour shifts. But when I worked there, it was an 8-hour shift, and it rotated every 28 days. So if you worked midnight shift, you'd rotate to day shift. You'd work that for 28 days, and then rotate to afternoon shift. Do that, and you'd find yourself back on midnight shift. So your schedule was pretty much set. You could do pretty much the whole year. You could do 10 years if you wanted to. Well, of course, that's subject to change. But you pretty much knew your schedule, and you knew what days off you were going to have and what shift you were going to be on and when the shift was going to change. So it was interesting working all three. I didn't really care for the midnight shift, but I would rather work all three shifts than get stuck on one of the three shifts that I really didn't like and have to do that forever. So I didn't mind too much the rotating shifts. That wasn't too bad. But when you went into the department, the station, to start your shift, you basically had a shift briefing. And that would entail sitting down. You'd have the whole shift together, not the whole shift, most of the shift together. And a supervisor or somebody that was appointed would go through the daily log, and there was the call list, call sheet. And they would start at the end of the shift that you had last worked and go through the two shifts and go through all the calls that the other shifts have handled. Get you kind of up to speed with what went on in the city when you weren't there. You'd also get a chance to review bulletins or memos or things from other departments. They may have an attempt to locate on a particular person, maybe a missing person or a suspect, or a particular type of car that they might be looking for involved in something where someone got a very good description of the car, but that was all they were able to really provide. So we would be on the lookout for the car. And if you had a chance, you could go through your mailbox, or what we called a pigeonhole, check and see if there was any court assignments for any cases that might have been scheduled up that would be coming up. Check and see if there was any interdepartment memos, or you could check your phone messages, which a lot of things came in via telephone message. And then once you were done with that, you would get your equipment, head out to your car. In the wintertime, you had to make sure that your car wasn't iced over, that you had visibility out of all your windows. And you do a visual inspection of the outside of the car to make sure the tires were inflated, that there wasn't any damage that may have been unreported, anything that might look broken or may not work. And then once you got in the car, of course you started it, made sure it ran. And then you start doing a check of your equipment. Some of it was simple, headlights, taillights, brake lights, turn signals, things of that nature. But then you'd also want to start checking all of your equipment. You know, your equipment could be, in my department, there was a two-way radio that you wanted to check. Usually it was mandatory. I didn't always do it, which was bad. But you should help your dispatchers out. Always call that you're in service. If you call in service and they answer you, you know your radio is transmitting and receiving. So that took care of that check. It also took care of letting your dispatcher know that you're going to be out on the road, which is important. Then the other people on your shift and the surrounding communities. You also have a siren unit that consists of the siren and a public address speaker, PA system. You would check that. If you had any speed detection devices in your car, when I started, the most popular one was a KR10SP radar unit that you would have to check with tuning forks to calibrate the speed and make sure it was functioning properly. You always wanted to do that if you were going to use it. You checked your spotlight to make sure that worked. If you had a laser speed detection device, you would want to check and make sure that that was functioning. There was a series of tests that you would perform, one of which was a distance, another one was the light, but there's ways of checking that. You'd want to check that. Your video equipment that came in towards the latter part of my career, make sure that the video camera functioned. If you turned your emergency lights on, which is another thing you wanted to check and make sure all that was functional, it was supposed to automatically turn the camera on. So you wanted to make sure that you did that and took care of that and made sure that that was working properly. You also had a shotgun, a patrol rifle. Some cars were equipped with defibrillators in the trunk. You wanted to make sure that all that equipment was present and accounted for and in working order. In the trunk, you also had a first aid kit. You wanted to make sure you had that. You had flares in case you had a traffic crash or something that you needed to let people know at nighttime that there was a lane closure or something that was ahead that needed to be concerned about, disabled vehicle or whatever, that you had plenty of those. And a fire extinguisher, which is important. Now, one of the times when I was working, the fire extinguisher, when I started, it was not in a mounted place inside the trunk. It kind of rolled around and did stuff when you were driving the car. Unknown to me at the time, I was driving up the road and the inside of the car started filling up with smoke, which I thought the car might be on fire. And I looked in the back seat and there was literally clouds billowing from the sides of the back seat into the passenger compartment. Pulled off on the side of the road, let dispatch know that I thought my car might be on fire, that I would check and let them know further before they called the fire department and had them respond. Started pulling the shotgun out of the car, the equipment, whatever I could get. But I noticed as I was doing all that, there wasn't any heat distortion coming off the car. There wasn't any paint blistering on the outside of the car. It just didn't look like it was a fire. There was a lot of smoke, but I didn't see anything burning. Popped the trunk of the car and found out that in the course of moving around and load shifting, the pin had come out of the extinguisher and it caught just right, and the whole extinguisher had discharged in the trunk of the car and it was going through. I mean, that stuff is very fine powder, which is better than having your car on fire. Unfortunately, the fire department didn't have to stop what they were doing and come out and deal with a car fire that wasn't a car fire. Part of that is probably why they started putting mounting brackets inside the cars, and that kind of stopped after that. But there's stuff in the trunk that you want to go through and make sure that you have all that stuff. Part of shift briefing too, I'll go back to, is you get your zone assignment. In my particular city, we had zones that we worked, and you would get your zone assignment. Once you checked all your equipment, the car was functioning, everything was working, then you could, again, let the dispatch know that you were going out on the road, and you would start checking your zone. That could be anywhere from a residential, majority of residential areas. It could be business areas. We had a large mall. We had an interstate highway that ran the length of the city, east and westbound. So there was always cars that, if the weather was bad, you wanted to check if they were disabled or weren't people freezing inside the car waiting for help. With certain areas, there was actually a crash one time where a car went off the road and flipped over. A truck driver going on a run eastbound he didn't see the crash, but he saw the remains of the crash, the car upside down, and thought, oh, that's not good. Nobody was around it. He did his run, he delivered his load, he was going back to wherever he was going to, and again, looked for the crash, saw it, and thought, well, that's odd that it's still here and there's nobody around here, and I didn't see anybody here before, so he called. We went down there and checked on it, and it was a crash that was not reported. Fortunately, there weren't any serious injuries, but if it wasn't for that truck driver and his curiosity and concern, it might have been there a lot longer than it was. And it was a cold day. You could see the tracks if you were going westbound. You could see the tracks leaving the road through the snow and ultimately down into the ditch and into a ravine. So it was a good thing that he called. So you want to check your zones. You want to check the highway, whether it's business or residential. You're assigned to a zone. Doesn't mean you specifically are only allowed to stay in that zone, but that's what you're expected to do. So we had zones. If you had special attentions, you wanted to take care of those. Once you were out and about and doing that, you were subject to being called. It could be criminal, it could be traffic, anything from a neighbor dispute to a animal complaint with a barking dog to a homicide to possible drunk driver, traffic crash. I mean, we could literally go from one to the other to another. We're fortunate where I work that we didn't have a really high crime rate. We didn't have a lot of murders, but they happen. You try your best to keep it from happening, but when it does happen, you need to take care of it, and they expect you to take care of it the right way. And we trained and hoped that we were able to do that. And for the most part, for at least when I was around and even before, it was always handled professionally, and we had a very good ratio of results with our investigations and things of that nature. So, and the group that's doing it now is still outstanding, and they still do a great job. So that's another part of being on the road. You have to kind of be a jack of all trades in this profession. The department I work for got into corrections officers a little bit later than most of the areas around us. So if we arrested somebody, it was pretty much the if you catch it, you clean it kind of system, for lack of better description. So you would have to not only arrest a person, you'd bring them on station, you put them in a holding cell. You would have to find out what cell was available to put them in if they were staying. You would have to type up a warrant, a recog, and a complaint. It was your responsibility to make sure that the complaint was signed before. It was your responsibility to do that. You'd have to take their property from them. You'd have to put the property into their locker and document all of that. You would have to fingerprint them, and then once you were completed with the book-in procedure, then it was your responsibility to get them from the holding cell into the cell that you assigned them to, and then you'd have to supply them with a blanket, towels, toothbrush, toothpaste, comb, the jail property. And there was certain paperwork that had to be completed during that whole process, and then you had to make sure that their property was secured in a locker, and then it was well documented what you received from them. So that kept you busy, and sometimes you had more help than you needed, and sometimes you were it. It was up to you to take care of that. Towards the end of my career, they got on board with corrections officers, and it lightened the load considerably. It was great to have those guys. So I think in the next video, I'm going to have Mindy Minx help me with a Q&A, probably on Instagram. I have an Instagram. I've got some pictures. I think somebody asked me if I could post a picture of me when I was working. That was a long time ago, back when I had hair and everything. There's one of those on my Instagram account, which is Larry Linx. And you can see that picture. You'll have to scroll up a little bit. It's down near the bottom, but there's a picture of me when I was working. Didn't get much better looking, if at all, over the years, but I've looked like this for a long time, so I'm used to it. I'm trying to think what else. We'll do a Q&A, and you guys can hit me with your best shot, so to speak. I also had a question. What was the favorite part of your job? What was the least favorite? I think the favorite part was going to a situation that needed immediate help. You had maybe an injury traffic crash in the roadway, and there was a large intersection that was blocked and traffic was backed up and people's tempers were flaring. You'd get there, it would be chaos, there'd be wrecked cars, there'd be fluid in the road, debris field, there'd be people injured, which is terrible. And it was up to you to figure out, are we going to need to close the road? Can we not close the whole road, but maybe shut down this lane? What lane are we going to close down? Am I going to have other emergency vehicles responding, meaning a fire truck or an ambulance? If so, where am I going to ask them to park their equipment? I mean, pretty much they know. They pull up and they find the right spot. You don't have to worry about that a whole lot, but it's going to block off another part of the road, which was fine with me, because the more they blocked off, the less chance I had of getting run over while I'm trying to do my job. It's kind of hard to drive through a fire truck to run me over, but people have tried, but and not on purpose, as far as I know. But then if there's a lot of injuries involved, is there mutual aid from other cities coming that are going to be coming from the east or the west, or what direction are they going to come from? Is there going to be one of our ambulances that's here and going to be leaving before the mutual aid arrives, so you can kind of direct them into where that ambulance was, so you can put them there. But after all of that, once it's all said and done, you've got the injured people going to one of the best hospitals in the area. You've got the roadway is being cleaned up by the people that we call for the tows to come and remove the vehicles. So in sometimes 25, 30 minutes, you've got the people that are injured gone. You've got the tow trucks already hooking up the vehicles. You got guys that are assisted either by us or the fire department or other crew with their trucks that are cleaning all the stuff from the road, picking up all the debris, the plastics, putting Easy Dry down to absorb the fluids. And you've got all the information that you need that you've compiled while all this stuff is going on, and hopefully you've got some other people that are taking care of witness statement forms. And it all comes to you so that you can put it all together and do the report and finish it and get it submitted. And 45 minutes, an hour after everything was total chaos, you could drive through that intersection, and unless you were stopped by traffic an hour before, you'd never know anything ever happened. It was all cleaned up, said and done. So that was fun. I worked at places where guys would work on projects for a long time. Technology would invent a computer program that would put them in a completely different way of how they were going to do it, and they'd come into work and find out, we're not doing it this way anymore. A computer has come up with a program, and it can simulate 10 different things that we didn't even think of, and we're going to go with that. Or the program's been moved from this facility to a different one, and we're going to start this now. Or, hey, the budget's been cut, we're done. So they work on something and never get to see it through. This was something where I worked that we didn't have a whole lot of. If you started it, you were pretty much responsible for finishing it. It was nice to have that where you could see what it was like when you got there, and an hour later see what it was like after all the work you did and the people that helped you, and everything is moving the way it should be. So that was nice. That's what I liked the most. What I liked the least, I would think probably the weather. I did not like winters in Northeast Ohio. Didn't care for the rain, and I don't miss the people that try and make your job as difficult as possible. It was hard enough without people coming in and intentionally, or just because of lack of common sense, have no clue what they're supposed to do. You have a crash, you have a utility pole laying across the road, you have high voltage lines down, you have some that are arcing, you have police vehicles, fire vehicles, vehicles from the illuminating company. The road is a mess, but if you leave a wide enough spot for a car to get through, they're going to drive through it because they have to get to Walmart. And when you stop and ask what the problem is, they say, well, I didn't see a road closed sign. Yeah, you got me on that one. I didn't have a sign that said road closed. I assumed that all the emergency vehicles and the equipment and the arcing high voltage lines and all the utility pole laying across the road would be enough to get into your skull that it was closed. But yeah, you got me. So I don't miss that at all. Other than that, I miss the people that I work with. The people at the city were always very nice to me, so I appreciated that, and I miss that. But I like retirement. It's 83 degrees right now in Florida, and I'm enjoying this quite a bit. So we'll do the question and answer, and you can get some more questions that I can try and answer for you. To give you an update on my reading, from I think the last video, I was reading the President's Commission on the Assassination of President Kennedy, which is also known as the Warren Report. Great book, but a lot of reading. This one took me a while. And I didn't show you before, I think I showed you the book. The Associated Press came out with this in 1964 also, and it's a thinner version of the 888 pages. It's 366 pages, and I went over that in the last video. But what I didn't show is I actually have a box that was shipped from the Associated Press in October of '64 of that book, which is kind of cool. So I had that, and once I finished that book, I started reading The Wrong Man, which is about the conviction of Dr. Sam Shepard in the July 4th, 1954 slaying of his wife Marilyn Shepard in their Bay Village home, which is a suburb of Ohio, west of Cleveland. Done by James Neff, who also authored a book about another crime spree that also touched into the city that I work for. So I don't have that one yet, but that's on the short list of things to read. I started this 2 days ago, and I'm a little bit more than halfway through it. So Q&A on the Warren report and the Kennedy assassination will be coming up soon. Also, I don't know how many people, it was a huge thing. It was the trial of the century, reported all over the world up until O.J. Simpson came along. So there might be a lot of people that know what this is about. If there's enough interest in this, then I'll do a Q&A on that and give you my thoughts on this. And there's a couple other Titanic books that are on the horizon here in the future too. So I hope everyone's well. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for listening to me yak. And everybody be safe, have fun, take pictures, and I'll see you next time. Bye.